Awesome. Well, welcome, y'all. It's great to have a nice intimate group here today. This is nRhythm's webinar on how to measure organizational health to unleash workplace potential. That's kind of a mouthful. Fran and I have a fun session planned today with just a little bit of a preview of our organizational health assessment tool for anyone who hasn't seen that yet. And we're just going to talk a bit more about how your organization could benefit from measuring health through our unique regenerative framework. So we're grateful that you all took some time to be here with us today. I'm Tay Lottie. I'm based in Santa Cruz, California, as I shared, and I'm part of the nRhythm team. Fran is here with us today. She's part of the organizational health assessment team and is going to lead us through the webinar. And for those of you who might not be familiar with nRhythm, we're a global design and management firm focused on revealing potential in people and organizations via the with life approach to organizing. So we work with networks and communities and organizations and individuals offering a range of support from one-on-one consulting and operational design and management support to different online capacity building resources, workbooks, online courses, tools like this one. And we have a global online learning community that really empowers us all to come together to design healthy, resilient organizations with life in mind. So that's a little bit about us at nRhythm. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Fran, to kick us off today.
Thanks, Tay. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all here. Excited to tell you more about our tool, the Organizational Health Assessment. So what we will discuss today, just Tay did some good introductions already. We'll talk about what is the OHA, why do we measure and monitor health, and then I'll really go into some details about how does the OHA work, how's it different from other tools. We used to call it the OHI, and I will tell you a little bit about that. There might be some people who know the OHI, and just share what the difference is and what does a timeline look like, what's the cost, and how to get in touch. And then Tay will share some exciting, just upcoming things for the OHA. So let's kick it off. Tay gave a great introduction of nRhythm. So if you don't know us, as Tay said, we're a regenerative organizational design and management company. We started in 2009. We're a group of people from many, many different backgrounds, designing, and we all have expertise in designing, operating, and resourcing organizations, networks, and communities. And we work on 6 continents, and we really, really work on in many, many different sectors, but kind of with a goal to work on the world's most pressing social and environmental issues. So let's talk about what is the OHA. Well, it is short for the Organizational Health Assessment, and this is a comprehensive baseline assessment tool. It embraces the interconnectedness and complexity to provide a holistic evaluation of your organization's health and regenerative capacity. And we call it an organizational health index, and I will go into this a little bit more, but we define an organization incredibly broadly. So we don't just do this with your traditional corporates. We do it with communities and networks and so forth. I will go into that a little later, but just wanted to say that up front. It's a very broad definition. It's a reflective assessment tool, and the whole point is to measure and monitor the health of a group of people working towards a shared goal. So the first question is, why do we measure and monitor things? Here in the picture is a very cute picture of 2 siblings. Probably, I'm assuming they're siblings. Just like measuring their heights. So why is measuring and monitoring important? Well, it helps us create a baseline. It helps us understand progress, helps learn about and adapt to changing conditions. And it also helps us to see patterns or anomalies to proactively address. If you can think of any other things and why we measure and monitor, add it to the chat if you want to. These are the 4 things that I came up with. And the next question I feel like that comes up based on why do we measure and monitor is what types of measurements and what types of monitoring are appropriate. And it really depends on what you're measuring and monitoring. So we like to think about measuring and monitoring simple, complicated, and complex things. And it really, that it makes a difference on how you categorize. So a simple problem is like baking a cake. A simple context. It has a list of ingredients. It's tried and tested recipes. I used to live in Denver, where Donna is, and that's high above sea level. And there you adjust the baking temperature a little bit, and you adjust the time a little bit, but it's a manageable thing, and it's fairly easy once you've got it, to repeat what you've done for baking this cake. Repeat the results. The cause and effect is obvious. It's a single path, single answer. The answer is cake. Easy. So a complicated problem is something like building a car or sending a rocket to space. There are known inputs, design blueprints, known steps. You do need experts. You're going to have engineers help you with this, but it's possible to create repeatable results. We have car companies creating hundreds of thousands of the same cars. We have multiple companies sending rockets to space, with companies and governments. So there are multiple paths to a single answer. They all build a car, they all build a rocket, right? So this is a complicated thing, but there are design blueprints. And then we have complex problems or complex concepts and things. And I think raising a child might be one of those. Each situation will be different. There are many inputs, unknown assumptions, unintended consequences. You can do the same thing. You can raise one child the same as another child, and the outcomes will be very different. So there are multiple paths, multiple answers. There's no right and wrong. So to solve a simple problem, you need a simple solution. And there, a more mechanistic approach, exactly measuring the ingredients, knowing exactly what to put into the rocket or the car, that helps. So, same for simple and complicated. And a more mechanistic approach is wonderful for these types of things. So what are we monitoring when we think of kind of a machine approach? We are monitoring productivity. We are monitoring efficiency. We are monitoring very predictable outcomes. And this is absolutely appropriate. When someone builds me a car and I buy it for safety, I think there's this idea that Volvo is one of the safest cars, right? You want all the cars to be the same. You don't want the car, there's to be some kind of anomaly. It should be very predictable. That's perfect. But what are examples? So I feel like when we measure and monitor an organization, we also use these kinds of metrics. So we look at profit per quarter, we look at performance per employee, we look at retention, we look at income and expenses, all these predictable outcomes, right? And there's this American mechanical engineer. His name was Frederick Winslow Taylor, and he was widely known for his methods to improve industrial efficiency. He was one of the first management consultants. And he is one of the first people who applied this very mechanistic approach to organizational management. And he coined this idea of time is money. Now, we argue at nRhythm that this is not necessarily appropriate because as humans, we are complex. We're not simple or complicated. We are complex. So while there is space for a mechanistic approach, we don't believe humans should be cogs in machines. This is not appropriate indicators for humans. Organizations made up of humans are complex, and therefore our approach should be different. Again, mechanistic thinking has its place, but it's sometimes applied incorrectly to organizations. So we at nRhythm use a little bit of a different approach. We use life as a model and not machines as models. When thinking about complexity, we think life is a really brilliant example of how to manage and monitor in a living systems or a complex environment. Living systems are resilient, adaptable, they allow for emergent outcomes. So our framework for managing complexity really becomes this. So, and what is the primary measure of a living system? And we believe it's health. So if you consider your own health, of course, we are all living systems. We are living beings. We go to the doctor when we feel a bit sick, but we also go on a yearly basis for a checkup, or hopefully we do. I know not everyone does that, but And then we measure and monitor things like our heart rate, our blood pressure, some blood work to understand the nutrients or lack thereof. And this tells us a story over time. We build up all of this data to understand what a baseline is for our bodies. And if there's some anomaly, what do we do with that? Right? So that's just an example of a living system that we look at. So at nRhythm, we use this to explain the difference between a machine design and a living systems design. Again, there's no right or wrong here. We're just talking about the application of one system versus another. So the machine design engineers best practices, it enforces prescriptive structures, and then it degenerates. And the whole idea, this concept of degenerating, it just means it requires more input. It requires external input. It requires external energy to make sure that you can create these repeatable results. You always have to put in something from outside into the system to make it work. So the difference with a living system is it can regenerate itself within a boundary of its own making. So a living system design informs patterns, it facilitates flexible frameworks, and then it regenerates. It requires less energy. So it's a self-maintaining system. Now, this is very high level. We go deep into this in some of our courses. So sorry, this is like crash course on our thinking. But this is just the difference in a living system design. We're saying we are complex beings within an organization. We are the energy of the organization, and we need to be taken care of, managed and monitored in a way that's more living, that makes us resilient and adaptable as opposed to machines. So when we do that, what are we monitoring in a living system? So if you monitor, say you have a vegetable garden, what do you look at? Or flower garden, you're going to plant something and you're going to make sure that the soil looks good, that the water is good, that there's enough sunlight, that there's enough, soil's good, nutrient cycles are good. And we translate that in an organization as energy. As I said, that's the people, and information, that's the nutrients. How does information flow within the organization? And then as part of that, we came up with this living systems framework for organizations. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but it starts off with this foundational belief cycle. And then you move to foundational belief could be, for example, we all are, healthcare should be accessible to all. That's a foundational belief, right? And we translate that into an operational identity to say, okay, we are going to create a hospital that is affordable for everyone. And that's the operational identity. It could be many other operational identities too. You can have a health insurance company or something like that. But anyway, so the operational identity is how you organize. This is why you come together. And when you come together, you have a specific context, you have specific work that you're going to do, you have specific structures. And this is what we, in the organizational health assessment, we look at that. That is what we measure and monitor, and that's in the organizational health assessment. And then that flows into emergent outcomes. Anyway, so this is our framework. And if you follow the arrow and you follow our framework like that, in the beginning, you design your operational identity, your foundational beliefs. Once everything is designed, you manage it, and then you continuously monitor it. And you go through the cycle the whole time. This is just like a living system, a cycle that we design and manage and monitor. So the Organizational Health Index is a tool to measure and monitor health. This is one of many tools. We're not saying it's the only tool, but we think it's a very high-level tool to think about health in an organization. So how does it work? It is a 38-question yes/no online survey, and questions are based on nRhythm's Living Systems framework, and they are asked in different categories, and all these categories align with this framework that I just said. So talk about context. We have questions around your context. We have questions about your structures, that's your operations. We have questions about the actual work that you do. We have questions about energy, how people thrive in the organization. There are questions on information and how that flows and cycles in the organization. And then there's a section on receptivity, and this is how open the organization is to change. So all responses are anonymized, it's strictly confidential, results are presented in the aggregate form. And then how does it work? So we send out a link to every single person in the organization and they answer the question. So it's very self-reflective. And we believe that in order to, so this is a Margaret Wheatley quote, this is not an objective looking from the outside, perfect like data about exactly where your organization is at. This is how people feel on the inside. So in order to change, the system needs to learn more about itself from itself. And this is really what we see the OHA to be, to learn about yourself from yourself. How do people, if you're an organization of 200 people, it's very hard for the CEO to meet with everyone and to hear how they're feeling. This is a good way to kind of gauge that feeling. So what can the OHA, who can use the OHA? As I said, teams and organizations looking to discover underlying opportunities and challenges in their organization and build effective and empowered teams, they can use this. But we are not specific about that. Organizations are, the word organization is defined really broadly. It's any group of people coming together for a shared purpose. So we've used it with networks, associations, and cross-sector collaboratives to evaluate their group dynamics and tensions, to break down silos of communication, to design structures to foster long-term health and thriving collaboration. We've even used it with foundations and investment firms looking for an assessment tool to select and monitor organizations for investments or grants so that they can build a diverse network of stakeholders. And we are using it all over the world with communities to galvanize around aspirational purposes and quality of life and engage community members in rural, communal, and urban contexts. So we've used this survey extensively in many different contexts. So what is measured? Again, as I've said, we use our living systems framework and we measure within that. And so once you've completed these 38 questions, the yes/no questions in these categories, we use the data to generate comprehensive reports. And these reports offer a macro and a micro level insight into the health of the organization. The reports include scores for each category. So all those categories that I mentioned, like context, structures, work, and all those things. There's an overall score, and there's a trend score, which forecasts potential future states based on how open the organization is to change. And then the scores are based on this numeric 0 to 5 scale, representing 3 states. The first is regenerative. And here we believe that things are intentionally designed and evolving to foster a really living systems approach in your organization. Transactional, many organizations are in a transactional state. I think this is where you would fall if you manage kind of in a mechanistic way, but still with some compassion. And this is passive, it's static. You're not actively creating a living systems environment. And there's quite a bit of silos. Yeah, it's just maintaining the status quo in general. Not specifically terrible, but really not great. And then degenerative, that speaks for itself. I mean, it's undefined, inadequate. It is unhealthy for the people working there. So we give these scores, and then we give it we provide 3 reports, and these reports are online. So the survey is online, and then once everything is done, we also provide the reports online. There's a company report, which provides company-wide details in those categories. We also provide scores per question, so you can really dig into seeing what is happening per department, per question, which is a good way to have good discussions. We also provide individual reports. Now, I said this is anonymous, or anonymized rather. And the individual reports are password protected, and it's just every person receives their own report. No one has access to anyone else's report. This is just to remind yourself of what you answered, because if you're anything like me, then if you've answered a survey last week, then you probably don't remember what you said this week. So it's just a good way to kind of remind yourself what you said and compare it with what the rest of the team said. And then if you've done more than one OHA in the past, there's a history report where we compare year on year. So, similar to going to the doctor, if you go to the same doctor every year, they probably have all your files, and you can see, if your heart rate is still good, if your cholesterol has improved or not. It's just really great to have a baseline and then to assess changes over time. So I do want to emphasize that this is more than a score. We are working with data here, and that's great. Always interesting to work with quantities, but it's the qualitative stuff is more important. The numbers are revealing, but the true power lies in the meaningful conversations that with a common language that emerge from the results. And we've seen this time and time again with our clients, where you do an OHA and the scores are, for example, pretty terrible one year. And then you have conversations about that and you learn, but at that specific point in time when we did that OHA, we went through a really tough week. X happened with the organization. Y happened with this person in their personal life. So there's always a context around it. And it's so important to discuss that. We've also had circumstances where the scores are incredibly high, so high that you're kind of questioning it, or just generally it's a really good regenerative score. And then you go in, you speak with the team, and you find out that this team has been feeling a little scared, to be honest, about what's going on. So they just say yes to everything. So the score tells a story, and the context around the score tells a story. And it's important to get to all of that so that you can really discover the underlying opportunities and challenges in the organization. And this helps you gain a perspective. It helps foster clarity. It helps foster cohesion. And it really helps people to align around actionable solutions. And then, of course, you monitor all of this over time. So scores are great. You can be very proud of a regenerative score. You can be concerned about a degenerative score, and the context around it is super important. So how is this different from other tools? In today's dynamic and complex world, conventional evaluation tools often fall short in providing a clear and comprehensive understanding of an organization's health and capacity. It can provide a very, very clear understanding of efficiency or of income and expenses, but it's just that holistic, larger level, healthy understanding of what's going on is often lacking. So we believe the OHA offers a clear and extensive evaluation of the underlying health. And it's not, we do want to say this is not a replacement, but it's an addition. There's nothing wrong with any other assessments. If you want to continue with your 360 assessments, that's perfect. This is just an addition to it. We kind of feel like this is a foundation, and then everything else can build on that. So it's not there to replace anything. We just think it's one of the best to look at health of an organization. So for those of you that might know the OHI, this was our old version. I just wanted to quickly touch on that. How is that different? So the OHI was a much longer survey. This one is shorter. It's more concise and more targeted than the previous version. Our old one was not online. Some of it might have been on SurveyMonkey, but our old one was a little more clunky. We are now on an easy-to-use platform that allows you to do it on the platform and see your results on the platform. And we've expanded some questions to include some equity considerations. Similarities, it's the same overall categories, which still allows you to compare it year over year. And it's the same, if not more, in-depth reporting. So getting a little bit more granular, what is the process? So usually you would reach out to us. We would have a quick call to discuss what your teams look like, what you want to measure and monitor. And then you would provide us with the names of your team members and the departments that you want as part of the OHA. And then we would set it up. It takes us about a week to set up. Then we would have the assessment. We would send out the links to your team members. We usually suggest that you provide about 3 weeks, even though the survey only takes 10 minutes per person. We do suggest giving quite a bit of time just to allow people to, people are on vacation or they're super busy. So 3 weeks is just enough time for us to continue with follow-ups. So people do provide their names and email addresses when they fill in the survey, but that's just for us on the back end to monitor who has done it and who has not, so I can send follow-ups. I do not share that information with organizations, so it's not so that people can go and poke others and say, hey, you haven't done it. It's just for our back-end purposes so that we can send follow-up emails to remind them to complete it. So 3 weeks we would suggest for the assessment, and then we take about a week to just analyze the data and finalize the reporting. We offer a 1-hour workshop with the leadership team to discuss the results and to discuss how we share the results with the rest of the organizations. And then, of course, any follow-up, we do provide follow-up services as well that we can discuss. If there are acute issues that we identify or any systemic things that you want to address in the follow-up, then we come up with a plan with you. So that's the process. And this is what it looks like. So once that link is sent out, everyone gets a personalized email. They click on a button and then it takes them to the website. It's an online survey. There's a welcome message explaining a little bit. And then you just scroll down. It's a single page. You don't have to click anywhere. You just scroll down and it's just all yes, no questions. There are 8 sections, 38 questions. It really doesn't take a lot of time. For every section, there's a little bit of an explanation. And at the end, you just hit submit and that's it. And then we get all the data. Then as I said, you receive the reports. You get a company report, individual report, history report. The company report goes into how many people responded in aggregate. It gives you the total scores. It tells you a lot about the scores. There's a lot of graphs that you can see average scores for the whole company, by each department. You can even have business units and departments. So there are lots of ways to cut the cake. And then my favorite part of the report is the detailed report, where you can go through each section and you can see how the company answered, the company average, but you can also see per department. So per question, how many people said yes, how many people said no to each question. And here you can see, it's a transactional score overall for this section. So it's 3.64. transactional in the middle, but there are 2 regenerative scores here. There are 2 transactional scores and 1 really low degenerative score. So what this helps with is for you to have the conversations after you receive the results. So we've had clients where they get the results, we meet with the leadership team, we have very high level discussions, and then each leadership team member goes and speaks with their team and they analyze their reports and their results. And because it's anonymous, there's no finger pointing. It's just saying, hey, so clearly there's a question around, do we know what behaviors bring health to the whole team? Let's discuss that. Was there uncertainty? Was there a lack of clarity? And sometimes people bring things up like, I interpreted that question differently than you did. And that's totally fine. That's part of the conversations you should have. There's no right or wrong here. It's just really understanding the context for everyone. Individual reports. So this is my individual report where I have to put in a username and password that's sent to me via email once the survey is done. And then what it looks like here, I can see my answers and then the most common answers and how everyone else answered. So that's just a useful way for people to compare their answers to the rest. And then the history report. Here we have a company that has done the OHA many times, and over time you can take a look at all the scores. And just more graphs in that report that you can play with. So what is the cost? It's usually tailored, but it starts at $1,499. It often depends on the number of employees, the reports needed, and other bespoke needs. But we have a special at the moment where you sign up for the basic report, the basic assessment and reports at $999. So if you sign up by November 15th, you can get it for that price, and it's completed at the end of the year. So what's included in that is the standard organizational health assessment of 38 questions for organizations of 200 people or less, and whatever number of departments you want. And then, so it includes the whole process of doing the organizational assessment, setting it up, having, and then receiving the results and the reports, and having a leadership team meeting to discuss the results. So that is what it would include. Our team working on this is me and Rachel and Trey. Tay and Donna are also here. They're also part of the nRhythm team. Feel free to reach out to them as well. Yeah, so there's a link if you want to learn more, and there's all our email addresses. And I'll pause here now. I know that was a lot of information, but I wanted to make sure I share all of that and see if we have any questions at this stage before I hand over to Tay to share a little bit more. Feel free, if you don't have any questions now, you can of course always just email us with your questions whenever they come up. Laura, I see you're unmuted. I was just wondering if you have one. Yeah.
Hey, how are you? Thank you very much
Good,
for the
how are you?
presentation. I was curious if you guys could reflect on, and I joined a little bit late, you might have covered it, but just what are you seeing in the industry as far as organizational health? It's a concept that really resonates with me, and I'm seeing it used more in different articles and research, but how many players do you see out there that are focusing on organizational health, and what is the differences that you're seeing?
Yeah, great question. So what's interesting, so McKinsey has an organizational health index, but we did dig into that quite a bit. And it's not based on a living systems approach, right? So ours is really, it's based on our framework. It's based on resilience and adaptability as opposed to efficiency. So I think ours zooms out a little bit more. It's a more holistic approach. I know it's becoming a buzzword, this organizational health, but I do think that ours is just a little bit more, yeah, as I said, a little more holistic and less mechanistic.
Yeah.
McKinsey's one, I don't want to call theirs mechanistic, but they are measuring very different things than what we are measuring and monitoring. Yeah.
And your summary of, like, at the end of the day, theirs is really trying to get at efficiency, I think is an interesting, thing to point out, right? You're trying to get at
efficiency,
health versus
productivity, right?
efficiency.
Yeah. So we wanna be efficient in how we manage people so that we can make more profit. And unfortunately, right, this is how we are set up in the world in a capitalist system. That is the one metric that drives so much in our world, is how much profit do we make, because that's what shareholders want, right? And that's just how the legal system is also set up. So that makes it really hard to move away from that. But what we are saying at nRhythm is, if you shift your focus away from the profits and you focus on health, the profits will be an emergent outcome. It will happen, but it will happen on its own. That's not something we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on the energy and information in the system to be healthy. If you look at your own body, if you have bad cholesterol, it's not something that you're going to just, there are pills for cholesterol, I get that, but you're kind of going to change you're going to create conditions for your cholesterol to be better. You're going to eat healthier. You're going to go for more walks, whatever those things are that you can do to create better conditions, and the outcome will be better health. The outcome will be lower cholesterol. So we're just shifting the focus a little. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to chime in too. I think it's a really good question, Laura, about how the industry is starting to shift and the dialogue is starting to shift around health. And I don't know what you've been looking at, but Gallup has really interesting, they put out a report every year called State of the Global Workplace, and they gather so much data from employees on engagement, where people are thriving, where they're not thriving in their workplaces. And the data is pretty depressing, to put it lightly. Like the 2023 State of the Workplace report found that 77% of employees are not thriving at work. And so to us, that's also another big indicator. Like, health in a system is also like realizing the full potential of everyone that's part of that system.
Yeah.
And so that's another big indicator and why we have found, even within our, within our own team, the organizational health assessment is so valuable because it helps you see within your organization, like those gaps where you're not realizing full potential due to lack of engagement, due to lack of information flow, due to poor decision making, all these different things that lead to why people are disengaged, and those disengagement rates are like it's getting so high in many organizations. So there's Gallup does some really interesting reporting on that as well. And they don't necessarily use the wording of like health, but yeah.
Definitely see and feel that as well. So I'll
Right.
take it that. Thank you.
That's a great question, Laura. Anyone else? Marianne, I see your question. How many companies tested the OHA so that you get some reliable / robust outputs, even though it's a qualitative approach? So great question. We've had thousands of people complete the organizational health index and now health assessment over the last 6 years. So it's not a new tool. We have tried and tested it for many, many years, and there's been many, at the back end iterations. This is our second iteration, to our clients. In terms of reliability, I think that's a great question. And what we focus on is the fact that you reflect on yourself, right? You reflect how you feel in the organization and how you perceive the organization to be in terms of context, structures, ops, work, your own energy, the information and how it flows. So it's more a snapshot in time, I would say. And usually it's a reliable snapshot in time. But that in itself is data, right? So if a team feels that they can't be honest, that's a piece of data, even though that's not reflected in the actual number because the number is high. So that's unreliable, if you will. But the piece of data is the team feels unsafe. And how do we work with that? So it's not perfect in that the data is always. So for example, nRhythm goes through, or we all go through ups and downs in our organization. So it's not a linear, we're going to all climb up if we start here. Now we know how to measure and monitor it, and we're all going to end up here. We're really looking at cycles here. And it is what it is at a specific point in time. And it can change even in 2 weeks after you've done an OHA. So I hope that answers it. It's not like a perfect data science answer. But I hope that helps, Marianne.
Yeah, another just thing to chime in there that I think it's a really good question, Marianne, too, of like how we gather more holistic data. Like something that we've thought about would be really cool is kind of how the Gallup's assesses the state of the workplace. Like if we were gathering a bunch of information over time on the state of health in organizations, and we could see that trend over time across our community, and across the network, that would be some like just really powerful insights around the work and the effort that people are doing to create healthier workplaces.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Tay. What is interesting in terms of the data, we have found that once we introduce the OHA to an organization and newly introduce it, and if they don't fully understand the framework yet, the words on you, we get that. Scores are typically pretty high. And then the second time they do it, the scores drop a little. It's because and what we have found is that because there's a real understanding now of the framework, the living systems way of thinking. And as people learn more about the living systems way of thinking and start thinking differently about how to manage and monitor from a more regenerative way, then they expect more. And they think more about it. And then next time, maybe they will answer no to a couple of questions instead of yes. Because they also know that if they answer no, then there's more conversations around it. So I just wanted to add that as another anecdotal thing that we've noticed.
Are there any trends in industries that are using this tool?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't hear properly.
Or just like types of industries or trends in the kinds of industries that are using your tool?
I don't know why I'm just quickly gonna switch on and off my Tay,
Yeah,
if you want to
Fran,
answer, I don't know why I can't hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Fran? Or just
Yeah, I can hear you a little better. But anyway, if you want to jump
Yeah,
in,
I'm
I'll,
happy to jump in.
yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think of what the breakdown would be because something, Laura, that's interesting about nRhythm's approach is we work across so many different sectors. So we work in agriculture, we work in built environment, we work in finance, we work in different, community-based organizations. Um, and the part of my instinct on where we would see this tool being more utilized is actually in the agriculture space. And the reason why is that part of these health indicators in this tool came out of some of the work that we used to do in regenerative agriculture and holistic land management of how they assess and monitor health on the land. So we learned a lot in that space of how they assess and monitor health on the land over time. And it reflected so much about that living system. And then we applied that to like, well, organizations are living systems, they're made up of humans. What if we assessed and monitored the health of this living system with similar, metrics or similar theories and concepts? So yeah, that's my hunch on an like and across an industry split where we're seeing more use of the tool. But yeah, Fran, do you have any thoughts on like industry wide where we might be seeing this tool being picked up more?
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. What's interesting, Laura, is that we also see in industries and in geographic areas where we think a more living systems approach is being used in the work that they do, this tool is being taken up more. So, for example, as Tay said, the regenerative ag space, people get it as a concept because they do it on the land. They don't, they probably don't manage their people in that way yet. That switch is an interesting switch, which Donna can tell you a lot about. She knows how that goes because she worked in the regenerative ag space. But saying, okay, we understand it conceptually because we do that for our work, that translates pretty well into we can adopt this organizational health assessment as an approach to measure our health as an organization. And that's not just in the regenerative ag sector. We have also seen it with Indigenous communities a lot. And we work with communities in, we worked with communities in New Zealand, we've worked with communities in Zimbabwe and South Africa, and now Uganda. So with those communities, because it's such an inherent part and it's such a lived experience of understanding a living systems regenerative approach and how they do work, it does seem to land very well, and they come back to do the assessment more often. Yeah.
I think it's funny, like the organizations that would need this most and score the lowest wouldn't even have this on their radar, right? So you have
Right, right.
a level
Well,
of maturity to think about this in the first place.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's also, like we've done it with engineering firms, and that's super interesting because once they're actually in it, it's all, language that we're used to in the workplace, but it's more about bridging that gap of why would I think about organizational health in this way? Yeah.
Laura, what's interesting is I'm a lawyer, and coming from that space, we've done it with a couple of lawyers and law firms and large networks over the world. And the resistance initially is it's sometimes funny because, it feels, to some people, it can feel so fluffy if you come from a very mechanistic world. And then once you see the value in it, I feel like it's taken up. But it takes one or two people to really see and explain the value for it to become something that they do often.
Yeah.
Donna, do you have any thoughts? Sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot. No need to share if you, okay, no worries.
I have a question. Hi, sorry, I can't be on camera right now. So the question, I guess, so you in the example you'd pointed out how one of the questions that got a big no was, do you know what behaviors bring health to the whole team? And so it sounded like, in this particular example, a lot of the employees don't. So so you give those answers back to the organization, but how much are you then providing coaching to explain what those behaviors are, like what the healthy behaviors are? And I saw in the process kind of chart you had there, it said workshop. So does
Yes.
that mean that that's part of you then teaching them, like given, their scores, you're coming and bringing this knowledge? Because I know you guys obviously have a whole lot of workshops and training for people, but for an organization that has no idea what this is about, maybe they're just starting with the OHA, how are they learning from this besides what their employees say? Like, how are they learning about things like that? Like where they are not scoring well on this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thanks, Kristen. So, yes, we provide a little bit of a workshop with the leadership team after the OHA to explain the results. The OHA report itself also contains a lot of information on what health looks like. So it's a really comprehensive report. But the ideal scenario is that we continue working with the client after that to help them figure out what health looks like for them, because health is context specific. What health looks like for a small team of 5 people is very different for a large team of 50 people. So, yeah, I mean, with many of our clients, we do an OHA as part of a larger engagement as well. So we're consulting on one aspect, and then at some point we bring in the OHA as a baseline assessment, and then we tweak strategies or we design a plan with them around, say, for example, a question like that. So yeah, I mean, it's both and. Report contains a lot of information. There is a little bit of a workshop with the leadership team, and we often continue our engagement long after the OHA to help design new structures or adapt current structures to help improve the health.
Okay. Okay. That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Fran, could you speak a little to its application between, like within a network? So you've spoken about kind of within the organization, and as you know, I'm thinking about kind of the health of a supply chain and its application broader. Are you able to speak a little bit to how that would be different?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So it depends on the type of network and how engaged the network is. We work with a lot of volunteer networks on this as well. And then there's usually a central management team or a full-time team that's not volunteer. And what often happens, we get the network to complete the organizational health assessment. Then we have meetings with little hubs all over the world, wherever the network is, well, whatever. So we have meetings to ground truth the results, to hear what's going on, to understand that context. And then that translates usually into a strategic plan, a larger strategic plan that we work with the central team. And then once the central team has come up with something, we go back to the network and we say, okay, how would this feel? Would this address the issues you have? But networks are a little harder because it's usually more distributed. But yeah, that's how we've done it in the past. And currently we have a couple of networks that we work with in that way. I hope that helps. We also have a specific network health index or a partnership health index. I shouldn't say an index, it's an assessment, a partnership health assessment. That is 10 to 15 questions, because some networks are not as engaged on an operational everyday level, so that they could answer the longer organizational health assessment. So that's also something we didn't include it here because, networks usually come to us and then we kind of figure out at what level the network is engaged. So we do have a shorter survey for some networks if they're not so engaged. I hope that helps. Great. Well, Tay has a few more things to share. So Tay, I'll hand back over to you and share the slides.
That'd be awesome. Thanks, Fran. And these are really great questions.
Yeah, really, really great.
I was also just noticing that it's looking like everyone here, we're all women. And I don't know, that's just like an interesting data point to me around how we hold and manage our organization. So we just wanted to share with you all that this month we're actually running a organizational health assessment giveaway. So we're running this giveaway for our community to give away one free organizational health assessment so that teams can measure their health through our regenerative framework. And the next slide gives a little bit of information on how you can enter and share it with other people that you think might be interested in seeing their organization through this lens. So like Fran shared, the giveaway is basically the same thing that you receive when you sign up for yourself to have an OHA. So you'll get the assessment, you'll get the reports, and then you'll get an hour session with our OHA team. The giveaway ends November 6th, and the winner will be notified on November 8th. It takes just 2 minutes to enter. So if you navigate to that link that I put in the chat, you just share a little bit of information with us about your organization, other assessment tools you may have thought about, as well as if there's any urgency or like dependencies on getting this information in light of the strategic planning that you might be doing coming into next year. So yeah, that's just a special offer. And we're also running an offer around, this is a new, kind of a new and improved edition of the OHA. And so we're offering it to teams at a discount for this month. So you can get the OHA at a $500 discount this whole month if you sign up before the middle of November. So like Fran said, you know, if this is something that your team might be interested in, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to talk to you more about what that is in your context and how measuring your own organizational health might be beneficial this year.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Sorry I
Great.
missed the very beginning, but I will check out the materials and may have more questions, but it's really great.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Thanks for
Thank
bringing
you.
some great questions today too.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone?